The top business stories from the Sky Newsroom and live from Davos.
Tells me she is excited to work with the Trump administration on boosting transatlantic trade. Rachel Reeves tells me the special relationship is alive and well and that the UK isn't in danger of being hit by Donald Trump's tariffs.
We will work with the Trump administration to get a good deal for Britain and make the case as well for the continuation of that strong trade and investment relationship between our two great countries.
Also coming up on Business Live, we'll see how the threat of those trade tariffs has gone down in China, plus the $500 billion Trump plan to lead the world in artificial intelligence. Yeah, very good afternoon on this Wednesday. Welcome to Business Live with me, Darren McCaffrey. And unsurprisingly, we're going to start again in Davos today, where the Chancellor has been wooing investors and speaking also to Paul Kelso, who is live for us there this afternoon. Good afternoon to you, Paul. What did Rachel Reeves have to say to you?
Yeah, I'm not sure I was top of the list of people she wanted to speak to. She's in the mountains in this ski resort following the money, Darren. Davos has its critics, but it brings together political leaders with business leaders and investors from around the world who control trillions of dollars in potential investment. And that's her message. She's come here to say that Britain is open for business, that the UK is now a stable place to put their money, and that her commitment to growth is sincere. We can see her there meeting with her Saudi Arabian counterpart, one of the many places she would like to persuade to invest in the UK. She's come with a signal that she really is serious. She's talked today about facing down opponents of expansion of Heathrow Airport, something no government's been able to manage for 20 years because of the environmental and political objections. She hopes that sets the tone for the talks that have been going on today and will continue tomorrow. She gave us a few minutes of her time to discuss her plans here and the economic challenges that remain at home. Chancellor, the economy is flatlined for the first 5 months that you've been in government. You've got a budget which many at home think is going to be anti-growth and inflationary. How are you making a pitch to investors here that they should be putting money into the UK?
Well, the most recent numbers show that inflation is down a little bit and the economy is growing. But do I want to go further and faster on delivering economic growth? Absolutely, I do. And that's why this government have growth as the #1 mission. And it's why I'm here in Davos to say loud and clear to investors around the world, come to Britain, do business in Britain. We want those jobs. We want that good investment because that's what makes working people in Britain better off.
You may want it and you may want them to come, but talk to them here, talk to big businesses at home. They are worried. You know, the cost of employment you are putting up, isn't it? The reality is that they are going to face more costs in the UK than they would have done before you won the election.
If you look at the UK's taxation compared with countries around the world, we remain highly competitive. The lowest corporation tax in the G7 amongst European countries, some of the lowest employment taxes. So Britain is an attractive place to invest. Indeed, PricewaterhouseCoopers survey earlier this week showed that global CEOs see the UK as the second best place after the United States to invest in the world. And so we've got huge strengths as a country, and this government are reforming the planning system, reforming the regulation system, making it easier for businesses to get things done, all with the purpose of making working people better off. Because if we can attract more investment to Britain, if we can boost productivity in Britain, that puts up the wages of ordinary working people right across our country.
How do you answer the criticism of those at home who are going to be hit by these budgetary measures? You say they are going to have to spend more on employment, that they are going to hold back investment. Are they just wrong?
Well, first of all, working people won't see any increases in their pay slips when it comes to taxation. That was a commitment we made in the manifesto, and it's a commitment we're delivered in government. I'm not going to deny that the taxes of businesses and for some of the wealthiest have increased in the budget, but we faced a £22 billion black hole in the public finances when I became Chancellor, the inheritance left by the previous government. To bring stability back to the economy is something that businesses absolutely need to make investment decisions. It was necessary to make difficult decisions on welfare, on spending and taxation. I've now made those decisions, drawn a line under the economic and fiscal mismanagement of the previous government so that we can move forward and get with that growth agenda of regulating better, of reforming the planning system, reforming pensions, making it easier to build and get things done in Britain.
We have a new American president. You've been to China to talk to them about investment. You've visited European counterparts. What's your message to the US and American investors? And have you got plans to take that directly to the States?
Well, of course, I've already been to the US twice since I became Chancellor of the Exchequer, and Britain has a strong, close relationship, a special relationship with the United States. When my opposite number, Scott Bessent, is confirmed, I hope to meet him as soon as possible to talk to him about how we can work together to grow both our economies, improve trade and indeed improve our economic security.
Overnight, President Trump has talked about the EU needing tariffs. It's the only way they'll get fairness. A trade war opens up and tariffs are going back and forth. What's the UK's position going to be?
Well, I believe in free and open trade, and I'll be making that case to my counterparts in the United States. But I'm excited about the opportunity to work with the new Trump administration. Trade between the UK and the US is worth £300 billion a year. 1 million Brits work for American firms. 1 million Americans work for British firms. So our economies are closely intertwined, and I look forward to enhancing and strengthening that relationship.
The truth, though, that outside the EU, the UK is effectively powerless in this fight, and if tariffs are levied on the UK, there's not much you can do in response.
Well, the UK has a trade deficit with the United States. The President Trump is concerned about the trade surpluses that countries around the world are running with the United States. That's not the case for the UK. And so we will work with the Trump administration to get a good deal for Britain and make the case as well for the continuation of that strong trade and investment relationship between our two great countries.
Okay, the year started with market wobbles, much of it international, I would accept, but there was a risk premium, it looked like, on the UK. We know borrowing in December was higher. You must know whether you're on course to eat up the headroom and break your fiscal rules. What is the position?
Well, the Office of Budget Responsibility do an independent forecast, and they'll publish that on March the 26th. But I've been really clear, our fiscal rules are non-negotiable. We will meet those fiscal rules to balance day-to-day spending with tax receipts and to get debt down as a share of our economy. But we are growing the economy, and growing the economy is the best way to ensure that our finances are sustainable and we bring good jobs, paying decent wages to Britain.
There you go. That was Rachel Reeves speaking to Paul Kelso in Davos, and we'll have more from Paul in just a couple of minutes. But first, we want to bring you up to date with some breaking news coming into us at Sky Centre, and that is in Ireland, where the Irish Parliament has been adjourned until tomorrow morning without nominating a Prime Minister, a Taoiseach. The idea today, of course, after long, prolonged coalition talks that Micheál Martin would become the Taoiseach, the Irish Prime Minister. That has failed to happen after a row in the Irish Parliament. Let's speak to Stephen Murphy, our Ireland correspondent, who is in Dublin for us this afternoon. Stephen, what has gone on here?
It's just remarkable scenes in the Irish Parliament, in the Dáil chamber today. Nothing like this has happened before. Usually, once the negotiations to form a new government have taken place, in this case, as is usually in Ireland, the coalition government, then the sort of thing that we should have seen today is purely procedural. They have the majority. You nominate and elect the Taoiseach. In this instance, it would be Micheál Martin, the leader of the Fianna Fáil party, the largest party after the last election. But in this instance, it's a coalition that's being propped up by some independent TDs or members of the Irish Parliament. Now, they sort of seem to want to have one foot in the government and one foot out of the government. They were looking for the same sort of speaking rights as opposition members get, and that sparked utter fury amongst the other opposition parties, people like Sinn Féin and the Irish Labour Party. So they were furious. We knew there was a bit of a row coming. Nobody here foresaw that it would actually basically hijack the entire nomination of a new Irish Prime Minister. It's now not going to happen today. Micheál Martin should have been here hours ago. This is Orsa Neutron, the resident of the Irish President Michael D. Higgins. Micheál Martin was going to leave the Parliament to a round of applause. His family were there. He would come here in a motorcade to receive his seal of office. He would then go back and start to select his cabinet, and they were going to hold their first cabinet meeting here at the Ors a bit later on. None of that is going to happen now. It's deeply embarrassing for Micheál Martin and for the coalition partners that they were unable even to get this through. It's pretty procedural stuff, but it clearly does matter. The opposition were able effectively to put a halt to these proceedings today, and they were looking for reviews of how this new system would operate. There's plenty on the in tray for Micheál Martin. He will eventually get past this, of course. The numbers are there, and the deal has been done. A new programme for government is there. So I can't see this being anything more than an embarrassing hiccup, but we don't know whether they'll be able to resolve this row over speaking rights tomorrow either. So who knows when we'll actually see Micheál Martin arrive up this driveway to receive his seal of office, and when he can actually get down to work and start trying to tackle the problems the Irish people face.
OK, what a mess, Stephen. Thank you very much indeed for your analysis there, reporting live from Dublin. Thank you. OK, let's return back to Davos, and Paul Kelso is there. And Paul, really interesting, that interview, isn't it, you had with the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. Rachel Reeves trying to still insist, and maybe rightly so, that that special relationship still counts for a lot.
Yes, she's clearly, she's hampered in some senses. She's come here with a doubtless sincere pitch to investors. The central tenet of it is that the UK is stable, not just in contrast to recent years at home, but also to European competitors. What you've just been discussing there regarding the situation in Ireland. The UK looks pretty stable, but she's doing it in the week that Donald Trump has arrived back with a bang on the world stage and threatened to upend everybody's expectations. Privately, the reception is sceptical about the case she's making, not her sincerity, but the proposition of the UK as a place to invest. Publicly, there is some support, qualified though it may be, and try and get a sense of that. I spoke to someone who should be well placed to know. The Chief Executive Standard Chartered, Bill Winters, is an American, but he runs a bank that's based in London, based in the UK, has been since its foundation, but it does most of its business in the Middle East and Asia. It doesn't have a retail business, it deals with investment and wealthy clients. We got a chance to ask him what he made of Donald Trump's impact on the economic consensus, and a little, perhaps, about Rachel Reeves.
The facts are coming out, so the initial actions are happening. Obviously, the key now is to see which things get real follow-through, get real traction. Some will require some legislative action, some will require passing through a legal process. But so far, no surprises, I think, in terms of the direction of travel.
Okay. All the sounds coming out are more protectionist. A lot of talk around tariffs, lack of specifics yet. How concerned are you that this is the start of a trade war?
We know that there's a process, right? And if I could look at the encouraging side, it's that there have been no tariffs imposed yet. So clearly there's a marker that's been put down. We're going to reach agreement of some sort or other, or else. And that's how negotiations work. And we'll see as time goes by how much is bluff and how much is real. And what we know for sure is that a significant increase in tariffs is going to cost the U.S. consumer a lot of money. At a time when inflation is already running a little bit hot, that's got to be a concern. And the market is somewhat volatile around that anticipation. We'll see how it sorts out.
We've heard a lot from European leaders here. They feel, to me, like they are still waiting to know what this represents. But from your position, with the amount of business you do away from Europe, does it feel like Europe is on the outside trying to get into the where essentially the action is in the global economy?
I've heard many references just in these past couple of days, but as I have in the past year, to the Draghi report. Europe has clearly lost some of its competitive edge, and it manifests itself in lots of different ways: lack of national champions, obviously slower economic growth, challenged employment situation. And we could go on forever about why all that happened, but the war in Ukraine hasn't helped, but that's not the whole reason by any means. The references to the quality of the Draghi report on competitiveness in Europe and the fact that they're going to implement the recommendations is encouraging. I think it's going to be very hard to implement those recommendations because they've been out there for quite a while now, well before Draghi. But this is Europe's chance to sort of rally around a cause and spark the popular sentiment, and by that I also include the business community, to get a little bit of the energy that we're seeing in the U.S. right now, which you love Trump, you hate Trump, it doesn't matter. There's energy in the U.S. right now, and there's investment going behind that energy.
From a UK perspective, your chair was with the Chancellor of the Exchequer on a trip to China recently. She's banging the drum for Britain. What do you make of, what's your sentiment towards the UK as an investment proposition?
Well, first of all, I think it was great that the Chancellor led that economic and finance dialogue, but also had a meaningful business delegation, including the chair of Standard Chartered Bank. And I think that's a sign that Britain is fully open for business and prepared to engage, even in against the backdrop of this challenged geopolitical situation between China, U.S., China, Europe. So I think the Chancellor is doing the right thing in terms of putting the sign out. The UK is open for business. She's also made very clear statements about the fact that we're going to reduce some of the red tape, step back the regulation in a way that's safe and sound. Exactly how that's going to work through, we'll see, but she's already taken some actions in terms of the rule book for banking regulation and things like that. And so I'm encouraged. But obviously she's got a huge challenge. The economy is struggling at the moment, and there's some real problems with the budget.
Now, the World Economic Forum is a place that brings together politicians, we know, and bankers and investors like Bill Winters, but it also brings together people from civil society and thinkers, from David Beckham, who we spoke to earlier in the week, to Professor Steven Pinker, a Harvard evolutionary psychologist and linguist. He's written many influential books, one in particular about how, despite what we might think, humanity is actually making enormous progress, and he's written about rationality, something that people might question in the current political climate. I got a chance to talk to him earlier and put it to him, is the world actually going to hell?
Some things are getting worse. That doesn't mean the world's going to hell. Some things are continuing to get better after setback during the COVID pandemic. The world has resumed progress in reducing extreme poverty, in increasing lifespan, in increasing affluence, in decreasing suicide. All of these have resumed their progress, and the world is better than it ever has been in those measures. In some other measures, the world has gotten a little bit worse. We've gotten a little less democratic. The war deaths have taken us back to the 1990s. Still better than we were in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, but worse than we were in the first decade of the 21st century.
Yeah, Steven Pinker had some fascinating other views, particularly on whether voting for Donald Trump, despite your misgivings, actually might be a rational act. We'll have to save those for another day. Tomorrow, we hear from the man who has dominated this event from afar. Donald Trump will be addressing the World Economic Forum remotely tomorrow afternoon.
I'm going to say a pretty punchy question there, Paul. I'm not going to lie. Is the world going to hell? I mean, it's but good stuff. Great interviews as always.
What say you, Darren?
I know. And as you say, big day tomorrow. Donald Trump addressing Davos. Thank you, Paul. As always, Paul Kelsey there live at the World Economic Forum. OK, you're watching Business Live. Still to come, we're going to be looking at how the markets are doing this afternoon. The FTSE down a fraction, also looking at those Trump tariffs in a little more detail. Stay tuned. We'll be back after this quick break.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power. No freedom! Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
1,500 movies? I don't want this flight to end. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Now, we've been talking a lot, haven't we, about Donald Trump and those tariffs? Well, Ed Conway, our economics and data editor, has been drilling in to the numbers.
Let me start with quite an eye-catching chart, one that's caught the eye of none other than Donald Trump. This is showing you how much tariffs have raised as a percentage of total US federal revenues going all the way back to 1798. And perhaps you can make something out. Look, for much of that first century of independence, the majority of federal revenues came from tariffs. Now, actually, it's closer to about 2%. It's under 2% right now. And so the argument is, look, could you not just raise more money via tariffs instead of things like income tax? Well, maybe a bit, but have a look at this. I'm going to take that same data and do it not just as a percentage of total revenues, but as a percentage of the size of the US economy. This is a kind of probably a better way of comparing it, because the economy was a little bit bigger compared with those tariffs back in the past than you might have thought. In fact, even in that period of maximal protectionism, the early Hamiltonian days of the United States, you can see that tariffs never really accounted for more than about 6% of total US GDP, and that's kind of been the case for much of history. And the size of the state was much bigger than that. You see, you needed a lot more money to try and finance the state, particularly when it came to wars. That's the World War II there. And that's basically where income tax came. It came in to fill that gap. Now, you certainly could raise more in the way of tariffs. And when you look back, actually, through the history of tariffs, so this is a different thing. This is looking at the total rate, the average rate of tariffs going back to the 1820s. And you can see it certainly was a lot higher before. It was really high back in 1828. There was a tariff that brought it up really high around there before the Civil War. They came down a little bit here in the 1913 to 1920 period, Woodrow Wilson. Then up again for Smoot-Hawley. That was a big act that raised tariffs on basically everyone, agriculture and industry. And then they came down again. And that's kind of the period we've been living through recently. Very low tariffs in the US and around the world. And it started, you can see, it's just started to tick up in the last Donald Trump period in office. But it does raise the question, what next? And if you're looking at who actually pays tariffs in the US, China is at 3.6%, Mexico and Canada considerably lower, the UK down at 3.6%. Where could they go? Well, Donald Trump has talked about maybe 10%. He's talked about 25%, but I'm afraid the short answer is right now, we don't really know for sure.
Conway there talking about the tariffs. It should be said that in the last 30 minutes or so, we've also heard from President Trump saying that he may well impose taxes, tariffs and sanctions on Russia if they do not manage to bring the war in Ukraine to an end. There is more on that coming up next with Mark Austin, who's live in Washington, D.C. with the News Hour. Simon's here in the UK with the rest of the day's headlines. No show from us tomorrow morning, but we're back tomorrow afternoon at 4:30 for Business Live.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment?
He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.